Mia and I met in college, a couple of freshmen figuring life out. I don't remember the exact moment we clicked, but it felt like I'd known her forever from the very first conversation. She was beautiful in that effortless, natural way. Always laughing, always pulling me into her world. And, honestly, I was in awe of her. I thought I'd found someone real. Someone who understood me like no one else ever had. We started dating just after the first semester. At first, it was casual. We'd grab coffee between classes, spend weekends exploring new spots in the city, and just talk about everything. By the time we were a couple of years in, I knew I wanted her to be my wife. It wasn't a big proposal. Nothing fancy. I'd been saving for months, and I asked her one evening, as we watched the sun set on a pier, a place that had become our spot. It was a simple yes, but it meant the world to me. After we got engaged, things moved fast. We started planning the wedding, booking venues, picking flowers, the whole deal. Everything was falling into place. We decided that I'd move into her apartment, and it felt like the beginning of forever. I was ready. Really ready. We were in that bubble of happiness, you know? The kind where everything seems perfect. The planning was stressful at times, sure, but that was normal. We even started talking about our future together. Kids, where we'd live, all that stuff. I figured we were just getting started. But as it turned out, I had no idea how quickly things could unravel. I remember the day it all started. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary at first. I decided to do a quick cleanup of our shared laptop. We'd both used it for everything. Work, bills, personal stuff. Nothing out of the blue. But when I was going through the folders, I found something I wasn't looking for. There was one folder hidden, tucked away behind everything else, labeled private. I know, it sounds stupid now. But I was just curious, and I wasn't expecting anything that would make my stomach turn like it did. So, without really thinking, I clicked on it. And then I saw it. Inside, there were pictures. A lot of pictures. Most of them were just images of Mia, taken in places and positions I never would have expected. The worst part. There was someone else in all of them. Zane. My best friend. The guy I'd known since high school. The guy I'd trusted more than anyone. He'd been at every milestone in my life. Weddings, birthdays, graduations. He'd been in my corner, my brother. But here he was, smiling in pictures with Mia. In places they never should have been. And they weren't just pictures. There were videos too. Videos that I can't even bring myself to describe. I don't know what's worse, seeing them together or the fact that it wasn't a one-time thing. This had been going on for months. It started before we were even engaged. The timestamps were there, plain as day. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't just the guy whose fiancée had cheated on him. I was the guy whose best friend had betrayed him, too. It wasn't a mistake. It was planned. It was deliberate. I couldn't breathe. It felt like someone had knocked the wind right out of me. I just sat there for a while, staring at the screen. All the emotions hit me at once. Anger, confusion, disbelief, hurt. A lot of hurt. I couldn't even process it fully, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let this go. I didn't confront Mia right away. I needed time. Not just to calm down, but to figure out what the hell I was going to do. But the next 24 hours were a blur. Every time I tried to do something normal, like grab a bite to eat or go for a walk, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And then, when she finally came home from running errands, I knew. I didn't have to say anything right away. I just waited. I wanted her to walk in and see me sitting there, holding that damn laptop open, with all the proof right in front of her. It wasn't a confrontation. Not yet. Not how I'd imagined it. Just silence. Just the sound of Mia's steps echoing as she walked into the apartment. I'll never forget the way she froze when she saw me sitting there, her face instantly going pale. Her eyes flickered, and I saw the guilt in them before she even said a word. It wasn't just the pictures, the videos. No. It was the betrayal, the trust that had been shattered. I couldn't even look at her the same way anymore. The person I thought I knew. She was gone. It wasn't supposed to go like this. I was just cleaning up the laptop, something we'd both used for everything. Work, bills, planning. I wasn't expecting to find anything out of the ordinary. I figured I'd delete some old files, organize things a bit. It's just one of those chores that comes with sharing space, right? But then I found it. It was a folder labeled private. It was tucked away under the wedding planning files, like it was hiding from me. There was no reason to think anything was wrong, but my curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. The first few images were innocent enough, at first. Mia, smiling in a way that was clearly meant for someone else, in places that weren't our usual hangouts. But then there were more. Pictures of her and Zane, my best friend. My brother, basically. At first, I thought maybe it was a prank. A sick joke. I kept scrolling, clicking through, heart sinking deeper with every new picture. Zane's arm around her waist. Her lips pressed against his cheek, her body pressed against his. It looked wrong. I felt sick to my stomach. And then, the worst part. The videos. I don't even know how to describe it. Moments I never should have witnessed. Intimate moments, things that were meant to be private, not for anyone else's eyes. There were clips of them together, in ways I could never unsee. The timestamps were the hardest part. Seeing them marked before our engagement, before the wedding plans were even set in motion. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It wasn't something that could be explained away by some rough patch. It had been going on for months. Months. All while I was planning a future with her, while I thought we were building something real. It felt like I was drowning in the realization. I wasn't just betrayed by Mia. I was betrayed by Zane, the guy I had trusted with my life, the guy I thought of as family. My hands were shaking. I stared at the screen, unable to tear my eyes away from what they'd done. The woman I was going to marry, and the man I considered my best friend, had been hiding this from me the entire time. I didn't know how long I sat there, frozen in disbelief. Time blurred. Part of me wanted to throw the laptop across the room, but I didn't. I just kept looking at the images, the video clips, the evidence that my life was about to be turned upside down. I didn't know what to do next. Should I confront her? Should I call Zane? Should I yell, scream, demand answers? But no, not yet. I couldn't. I needed time to figure this out. I needed to breathe. But all I could feel was that hollow pit in my stomach. It was like I was already grieving something that hadn't even happened yet. And when Mia came home a few hours later, nothing was going to be the same again. She walked in, still humming the tune of whatever errand she had been running. Her face brightened when she saw me, but that only lasted a second. The smile faded the moment she noticed the laptop on the table. I didn't have to say anything. She knew. She knew exactly what I had found. The room was heavy with silence, suffocating. Mia stood frozen in the doorway, her eyes darting from me to the laptop. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. I just kept staring at her, the weight of what I had found pressing down on me. It was hard to look at her. Hard to process the fact that she'd done this. Done all of it, with Zane. My best friend. My fiancé. Together, behind my back. She stepped inside, slowly, cautiously, like she was hoping the silence would somehow soften the blow. She must have thought I hadn't seen what I saw, that maybe I'd misinterpreted things. But the look on her face, the pale skin, the nervous glance away from my eyes, told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't ready for this. She wasn't ready for me to see her like this, exposed for the liar she was. I didn't react. I didn't shout. I didn't even stand up. I just stayed there, sitting on the couch, my eyes fixed on her, the laptop still open in front of me. Let her feel the weight of it. Let her feel the truth closing in around her. It was all I could do to keep from throwing up right then and there. The anger, the hurt, the disgust. It was overwhelming. She stood there for what felt like an eternity, unsure of how to approach me. Her fingers fidgeted with the strap of her purse, the hem of her shirt, anything to avoid looking at the truth I'd uncovered. I could see the guilt on her face before she even spoke, but she still tried to act like everything was normal. She moved toward the couch, sitting down next to me, her voice trembling slightly as she asked if I was okay. Like she didn't already know. I didn't answer. I just waited. The seconds felt like hours. I didn't need to say anything because I knew what was coming next. She was going to try to explain herself, try to talk her way out of it. But no amount of words could change what I had seen. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was shaky, but there was an air of defensiveness behind it. She said it had been a mistake. That it was before things got serious. Before we were planning a wedding. She kept saying she didn't know what had happened. That it was just a rough patch in our relationship. But her words sounded hollow, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. And that's when I felt it. This cold, steady rage building inside me. She was lying. She was trying to make me believe it wasn't as bad as it was, trying to make it seem like it was a moment of weakness, something that could be brushed off. But I wasn't stupid. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a slip-up. She had chosen to do this. She had chosen Zane. And she had lied to me about it. The entire time we'd been planning our life together, she'd been sleeping with him behind my back. There was no, before things got serious, that could justify this. No rough patch that explained why she'd given herself to someone else. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I didn't need to. I could feel the coldness of my own anger seeping into my words, into the way I looked at her. I didn't have to say much at all. But she kept talking, kept digging herself deeper, saying it didn't mean anything, saying it didn't change how she felt about me. But how could I believe her? How could I look at her, the woman I was about to marry, and not see the person who had shattered everything we were supposed to have? I wasn't listening to her anymore. The words became background noise. The pain, the betrayal, was too much to bear. I could feel my world crumbling around me, piece by piece, and all I could do was sit there, stunned and furious, as she tried to salvage what was left of our broken reality. And that's when I knew. I knew there was no coming back from this. Not for me. Not for us. Whatever we had was gone, and there was nothing she could say to fix it. The minutes dragged on as Mia kept talking, pleading, justifying. She wasn't even looking at me anymore, her eyes darting around the room, anywhere but at the truth sitting in front of her. I could hear the desperation in her voice, but none of it mattered. She was trying to make me believe it wasn't as bad as it seemed. But I wasn't buying it. I didn't want to hear her excuses. I didn't need to hear her talk about how it had been a mistake, how it had been before we got serious. She kept repeating it like a mantra, hoping it would make the mess she had created go away. But I wasn't that naive. I kept my eyes locked on her. I didn't blink. I didn't look away. I could feel the coldness inside me spreading, chilling everything around me. Every word she spoke felt like a slap in the face. Each excuse she made felt like another layer of betrayal I had to peel away. When she finally stopped talking, the silence between us was suffocating. I could hear her breathing, shallow and uneven. She was waiting for me to say something, to tell her that I understood, to tell her that we could fix this. But that wasn't going to happen. I didn't want to fix this. Not anymore. I let the silence hang in the air a little longer, watching her squirm. Her lips trembled as she waited, and then she finally turned to me, almost pleading, asking if I was going to say anything. I didn't respond right away. I wanted her to feel every second of that silence. I wanted her to understand that I wasn't going to accept her lies. There was no apology big enough to make up for what she'd done. No, I'm sorry, that could erase what I had seen. Finally, when I couldn't take the tension any longer, I spoke. My voice was calm. Too calm. In a way that made it all the more terrifying. You want to explain this? I asked, holding up the laptop, showing her the folder again, the pictures and videos flashing on the screen. Her face went pale. Her eyes flickered to the screen, then back to me. For a moment, I thought she might break down, but she didn't. Instead, she reached out to take the laptop, as if she could somehow take it away and make it disappear. I pulled it out of her reach, not letting her touch it. It was too late for that. She started to talk again, but the words came out in a jumble. She said it didn't mean anything. That Zane had been a friend she'd leaned on during a tough time. That it didn't change how she felt about me. But I didn't care about her explanations anymore. Every word felt like another betrayal. I could feel my heart breaking, but I didn't show it. I couldn't show it. I was too angry, too disgusted. Her attempts to salvage anything from this only made it worse. I could see the panic in her eyes, the realization that she had crossed a line that she couldn't come back from. She had no idea what to say. She just kept repeating how sorry she was, how it wasn't what it looked like, how it was all a huge mistake. But there was no mistaking it. It was real. What they had done was real. And no amount of apologies could undo it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the laptop across the room, to demand answers from both of them. But I didn't. I stayed calm, cold. I wasn't going to let her see how much she had hurt me. Instead, I just stared at her. And then, without another word, I stood up, grabbing my jacket off the chair. She looked at me, confusion written all over her face, but I didn't offer her any explanation. I just turned and walked out the door. She didn't follow. She didn't even try. And as I stepped out into the cold air, I realized something. This wasn't just a betrayal of trust. This was the end of everything we had, everything I thought I knew about her, about us. It wasn't just the affair. It was the lies, the manipulation, The years of pretending everything was fine while she was with someone else. I knew, in that moment, there was no going back. And I wasn't sure I wanted to. I spent the next 24 hours in a haze of anger, confusion, and heartbreak. It was like I was living in a fog, unable to make sense of any of it. Mia's lies kept echoing in my mind, but her voice had become distant, like I was listening to someone else's nightmare. And Zane, the guy I'd known since college, the one I'd shared everything with, was the person who had put me in this position. I didn't know how to process it all. I'd been blindsided. There was no easy way to reconcile what I just learned with the friendship I thought I had, with the life I thought I was building. I tried to tell myself it was just a momentary lapse. Maybe it wasn't as serious as it seemed. Maybe it was all just a misunderstanding, a one-time mistake, a thing of the past. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. This wasn't some brief affair that had been forgotten. This had been months. Months of deception. It had been happening while I was planning a life with Mia, while I was getting ready to marry her. And Zane had been right there, smiling at me, acting like everything was fine, while he was sleeping with the woman I loved. I sat in my apartment, staring at the wall, going over the images again. The videos. The messages. They were burned into my mind. I felt this surge of rage like I'd never felt before. It wasn't the kind of anger that made you want to yell or break something. No. It was the kind of rage that made you cold. That made you think. That made you plan. And that's what I did. I started thinking about how to make them both feel what I was feeling. I wasn't going to let Mia and Zane get away with this. I wasn't going to let them think they could betray me and get away unscathed, that they could go back to their lives like nothing had happened. No. That wasn't how this was going to go down. I was going to make sure they paid for what they did, both of them. I needed a way to get back at them. Something that would hurt, something that would expose them for the liars they were. I needed to strip away the mask they'd been wearing, the image they had built of themselves as good, honest people. The more I thought about it, the more the plan took shape. I wasn't going to confront them separately. No, I had something far more public in mind. I knew the perfect moment, Mia's wedding. It would be the perfect stage for their humiliation. She wanted a perfect day, surrounded by friends and family, all smiling, all pretending like everything was right in the world. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I wasn't going to let them pretend. I would expose them at the altar. In front of everyone. Let them see what they had done. Let them feel the shame of their actions. It was cruel, yes. But I couldn't think of any other way to make them understand. To make everyone understand just how much they'd taken from me. The idea of standing there, in front of everyone, watching as their perfect world fell apart, it was almost satisfying. Almost. I called Zane. It was a simple message, really. Just an invitation to meet up, talk things over. He didn't know what I had in mind, but I knew he wouldn't turn me down. Zane was my best friend. He trusted me, and I was going to make sure that trust was shattered the same way he had shattered mine. The meeting was set for the night before the wedding. He didn't suspect a thing. He thought I'd be angry, maybe. He probably expected me to yell or accuse him. But I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me lose my cool. Instead, I was going to watch him squirm. Watch him realize, too late, that there was no escaping what was coming. I took a deep breath. I was ready. Ready to make Mia and Zane pay for what they had done. Ready to burn the life I thought we were going to have together to the ground. And when I thought about it, when I really allowed myself to feel it, there was no guilt. Not yet. I couldn't feel guilty for what I was about to do. Maybe later, maybe when it was all over, I would. But for now, I just felt cold. Cold and calm, like I was finally in control. The night before the wedding, I walked into the bar where Zane was already waiting. He had no idea what I knew, and I wasn't about to let him off easy. He grinned when he saw me, raising his glass in some half-hearted toast to friendship. It was sickening to look at him, but I forced myself to sit down across from him and return the gesture with a cold smile. I could see the tension in his body as I stayed quiet, watching him closely. Zane, always so confident, looked nervous for the first time in a long while. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the weight of what I was about to do hanging in the air. Either way, he tried to make small talk, acting as if nothing was wrong, but I wasn't biting. When he finally worked up the courage to ask what was on my mind, I told him we needed to talk about Mia. I watched as his face paled, his casual demeanor faltering. He must have thought I was suspicious. Maybe I'd overheard something, or Mia had slipped up. But he didn't know the half of it. Not yet. I laid it out slowly, piece by piece. I told him I had stumbled across some things. Some messages. Some pictures. Some videos. His face turned completely white, his mouth opening and closing like he was struggling to find the right words. He stammered an apology, saying it wasn't what I thought, but I cut him off. I wasn't interested in his excuses. I wasn't interested in anything he had to say. I told him I had copies of everything. That I knew everything. Every betrayal. Every lie. Every single moment they thought they could keep from me. He tried to explain himself, saying it had been a mistake, a lapse in judgment, but I wasn't having it. You knew what you were doing, I told him, my voice cold and even. You knew, and you did it anyway. With her. While we were planning a wedding. He kept apologizing, over and over, but his words were hollow. I could see the panic in his eyes as he realized there was no way out of this. He tried to plead with me, to beg for forgiveness, but I wasn't there to forgive him. I was there to make sure he understood what was coming. I told him I wasn't going to stop the wedding. Mia didn't know I had spoken to him. She didn't know what I was planning. I wanted her to walk down that aisle thinking everything was perfect, thinking she had fooled everyone. And then, I wanted them both to feel the full weight of what they had done. Zayn's face twisted into something between fear and anger, but he didn't say a word. He knew there was nothing he could say that would make this better. He knew he had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I stood up to leave, looking down at him one last time. He didn't meet my eyes, and I didn't wait for him to try. The stage was set. Tomorrow, everything would come crashing down. The morning of the wedding felt surreal. It was supposed to be a day of celebration, the culmination of years of planning, dreams of a perfect future. I should have been focused on the ceremony, on the vows we were supposed to share. But instead, my mind was consumed by the knowledge of what I was about to do. What I had to do. I was still numb. My emotions had been fluctuating between anger and detachment, but there was no sense of joy in my chest, no excitement for the future. How could there be? I was about to watch my world shatter in front of all those people who thought they knew us, thought they knew her. I spent most of the morning pacing, gathering my thoughts. The house felt empty, the weight of the upcoming event hanging like a thick fog in the air. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be part of it. But I couldn't back out. Not now. Mia had no idea what was coming. She had no clue that the perfect wedding she'd been dreaming about for months, maybe even years, was going to be ripped away in front of everyone she loved. In front of our friends, her parents, her family. And Zayn. Well, Zayn didn't know either. He probably thought I'd given him some sort of get-out-of-jail-free card just by meeting with him. But I wasn't going to let him off that easy. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. I looked like a man preparing for a battle. Cold, calculated. I barely recognized the person looking back at me. I wasn't the man who had planned this wedding. I wasn't the man who had loved Mia with everything I had. That guy was gone. I was someone else now. Someone who wasn't afraid to expose the truth. When I arrived at the venue, I kept to myself. I didn't interact with anyone except to handle the necessary details. Mia was getting ready with her bridesmaids, her laughter echoing down the hall, so oblivious to the storm brewing just outside. She had no idea that today wasn't going to be her perfect day. It was going to be the day everything came crashing down, and she was going to feel the consequences of her choices. I took a moment to sit down, staring at the program for the wedding. I wasn't sure why I was still holding it. Maybe I was looking for some comfort, some sign that I hadn't completely lost everything. But there was nothing left. Nothing but the cold resolve inside me. As the guests began to arrive, I made sure everything was in place. The large projector screen behind the altar had been set up earlier, just as I'd planned. Nobody would see it coming. Mia wouldn't see it coming. But it was time. It was time for the truth to be exposed. I kept thinking about what would happen when the screen flickered to life. Would Mia break down? Would she beg for mercy? Would she try to explain it all away? The thought of her face, her expression when the images and videos started playing, filled me with a bitter satisfaction. I wasn't doing this to hurt her. Not really. I was doing this because she had hurt me. She had betrayed me, and in front of everyone, I was going to make sure she saw the damage she'd done. Not just to me but to us. To the life we had built. Zayn, the man who had been like a brother to me, the man I'd trusted with my deepest secrets, was about to be exposed for what he was. A liar, a cheater, a backstabber. I couldn't wait to see the shame spread across his face when the footage was shown. He might have thought he was going to get away with it, but I wasn't going to let that happen. The moment was almost here. The moment I had been planning for. I was standing at the front, watching as Mia and her bridesmaids made their way to the altar. Her smile was wide, her face glowing with happiness. Her happiness, built on lies. But I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I just stood there, waiting for my cue. Waiting for her perfect world to come crumbling down. And when it did, when I hit that button and the screen flickered to life, I didn't feel sorry. I didn't feel any regret. I felt nothing but the cold satisfaction of having taken back control. Mia stood at the altar, glowing in her white dress, her smile wide and full of expectation. She looked like a vision, beautiful, serene, everything she had dreamed of. Her eyes scanned the crowd, filled with the faces of our friends, family, people who had come from near and far to witness what they thought was the start of our forever. Her parents, sitting front and center, looked on with pride, her friends whispering in hushed excitement. This was her moment, her perfect day, the culmination of everything she'd worked for. And then, the screen behind us flickered to life. It took a second for the crowd to notice, but the moment they did, everything fell silent. Mia didn't realize at first. She kept smiling, her gaze still on the guests, probably wondering why no one was reacting. And then, slowly, her eyes shifted to the screen. Her smile faltered. Her face went pale. It was like a switch flipped. In an instant, the air in the room went from warm and joyful to heavy, thick with tension. The images on the screen were unmistakable. Mia, caught in intimate moments with Zayn. The pictures were hard to ignore, and the videos? They showed everything. Everything they had done, the lies they had lived. The betrayal was undeniable. At first, there was just silence. The kind of silence that fills a room so completely, you can hear your own heart beating. It was as if the entire world was holding its breath. I could feel the eyes of the room on me, but I didn't care. I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at Mia. Her face contorted in shock, in horror, as the footage played on. Her hand instinctively went to her mouth as if she was trying to stop the words from coming out, but she couldn't. The tears started welling up in her eyes, her lips trembling as she took a step back. She didn't move forward, didn't try to hold my hand or fix what was happening. She just stood there, frozen. Zayn was standing at the back of the room, a look of disbelief on his face, his mouth hanging open. He had no idea this was coming. He had no idea what I had done until this very moment. I saw him take a step forward, looking for a way out, his eyes darting around like a man caught in a trap. He looked like he wanted to run, but he couldn't. The truth was already out, and there was no escaping it. Mia tried to move toward me, her steps shaky, but I didn't give her the chance. I stepped forward, blocking her path, standing between her and the guests. "Before we continue," I said, my voice quiet but sharp enough for everyone to hear. "Let's make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of woman you are. And let's not forget the kind of man Zayn is, too." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The room was already in shock, and my words, calm, deliberate, cut through the silence like a knife. Mia's parents looked at her in disbelief, some of her friends gasping, covering their mouths in horror. Zayn stood frozen, unable to make a sound. I could see the panic on his face as he realized that his betrayal was laid bare for everyone to see. Mia started to move towards me, reaching for my arm, her voice a desperate whisper, begging me to stop. She tried to speak, to explain, but I wasn't listening. Her excuses, her pitiful, weak excuses, meant nothing anymore. She had made her choices, and now she had to face the consequences. I kept my eyes on her. I watched as the color drained from her face, her composure cracking piece by piece. I didn't say anything else. There was no need to. The damage had been done. The room had seen the truth. Mia's perfect wedding was now a public spectacle. Zayn's betrayal was exposed for everyone to see. The moment dragged on, as Mia tried to control her tears, her hands trembling. She looked around the room for help, for someone to say that this wasn't real, but no one did. They had all seen the evidence. They all knew. And then, as Mia turned to run, to escape the shame that was flooding her, I stepped aside, letting her pass. But I wasn't done. Not yet. "Zayn," I called, turning to face my supposed best friend. His head shot up, his face a mask of panic. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. It didn't matter. Nothing he could say would undo what had just been exposed. I didn't need to say anything more to him either. The crowd had already seen it. Zayn, once my brother, was just another man who had lied to me, who had broken our bond in the worst possible way. Mia didn't make it far before she collapsed in tears, her sobs echoing through the church. Her parents rushed to her side, But it was too late. The truth had already broken her down. And Zane. He didn't even try to comfort her. He just stood there, ashamed, silent, probably wishing he could disappear into the floor. I didn't wait around. I turned and walked away, out of the church, out of their lives. The weight of it all hit me once I stepped outside. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel like I had won. I just felt empty. But I knew one thing for sure. I had taken back control. I had made them feel the pain they'd caused me. I had shown them that no one, not even my best friend, could get away with destroying my life. Not without consequences. The days after the wedding felt like a blur. It was hard to piece together what happened after I walked away from that church, but I can still remember the cold air hitting me as I stepped outside. Everything felt strangely distant, like I was in a movie, watching my own life fall apart. I didn't reach out to anyone. I didn't talk to Mia. I didn't talk to Zane. I couldn't. What was there to say? The truth was out there, exposed for all to see. Mia's desperate calls went unanswered. Zane tried to send me a message, but I deleted it without even reading it. There was nothing he could say that would make it right. There was nothing Mia could say that would undo what she had done. The hardest part, though, was the silence from everyone else. Our friends, people I'd known for years, stayed away. I wasn't surprised. They didn't know what to do, how to act. They'd seen everything on the screen. They knew the truth, but now they had to choose sides. Some reached out to me, but not in the way I needed. I didn't want pity. I didn't want their condolences. I just wanted space, time to breathe, time to figure out what came next. Mia's parents called me, too. I didn't answer. I couldn't face them. I couldn't listen to them tell me how sorry they were for what had happened, how they never saw it coming. They never would have thought their daughter was capable of something like this. They couldn't imagine how it felt to be on the other side of her betrayal. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't need their apologies. I spent the next few days going through the motions, but everything felt hollow. The anger had started to fade, replaced by a heavy emptiness. What had I really gained from all this? The truth had been exposed, but at what cost? I'd hurt people who didn't deserve it. Mia's family, my friends, even some of the people I didn't know well, they were all caught in the wreckage of my revenge. The image of her crumpled on the floor, her makeup smeared, her face twisted in despair, haunted me. But then, the guilt started to creep in. Not because I regretted what I'd done, but because the aftermath felt so incomplete. I didn't feel better. I didn't feel like I'd won. I felt like I'd burned everything to the ground and left the ashes to settle without a second thought. And maybe, deep down, I knew I hadn't really gotten back at Mia. Not the way I wanted to. When I finally spoke to my closest friend, Greg, it was like a weight lifted. He hadn't been at the wedding, hadn't been part of that day, but he'd heard the stories. The rumors. The whispers that followed the fallout. Greg was the only one who understood the full extent of what had happened. He didn't judge me. He didn't ask questions. He just listened. "Do you regret it?" he asked me, after a long pause. I thought about it for a moment. I didn't know. I didn't have the answer. I wasn't sure if I'd been right or wrong. But I did know one thing. The moment I'd walked out of that church, I'd left behind the man who had been in love with Mia. The person I was before that day was gone. I had been broken, shattered, but I had rebuilt myself into something new. Someone who couldn't go back to the past, no matter how much I might have wanted to. "No," I finally said. "I don't regret it. But I don't feel like I've won either." It wasn't a satisfying answer. But it was the truth. Mia tried to contact me once more, a few days after the wedding. She left me a message, saying she was sorry, begging me to meet her. She claimed it was a mistake, that she was confused, that she loved me and wanted to fix things. She said everything I wanted to hear in that moment, every single thing she should have said before everything fell apart. I didn't respond. There was no fixing this. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. I had given her a chance to come clean, a chance to tell me the truth. She had chosen to lie, to deceive me, to betray me in the worst possible way. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need her back. And Zane. Well, he was a ghost in my life now. He tried to reach out, but I knew it was pointless. We were done. I trusted him like a brother, and he had thrown that trust away for a fleeting affair. There was no coming back from that. As for me, I was still figuring it out. I wasn't sure what the future held, or what kind of person I was going to be. But I knew I couldn't stay in the past. I couldn't keep looking back at what Mia and Zane had done. I had to move forward. Maybe someday, I would be able to forgive them, or at least understand why they did what they did. But right now, the only thing I cared about was healing. Rebuilding myself. And that was going to take time. Weeks passed, and slowly, the numbness started to fade. At first, it was all I could do to get through the days without completely falling apart. I tried to keep busy, keeping my mind occupied with work, with anything that didn't remind me of Mia and Zane. The silence in my apartment was suffocating, the emptiness of it all hard to ignore. It felt like I was living in someone else's life, someone who had nothing left to hold on to. But as time went on, I started to realize something. I didn't need them anymore. I didn't need Mia. I didn't need Zane. And most importantly, I didn't need to stay stuck in the anger or the bitterness. I had let them take too much from me, and it was time to take it back. The first step toward moving on was accepting that I wasn't the person I used to be. I wasn't the guy who trusted easily, who believed in love without question. I wasn't the guy who thought relationships were built on trust, loyalty, and honesty. No, that version of me was gone, buried with everything that Mia and Zane had destroyed. It wasn't about revenge anymore. That part was over. The damage had been done, the truth had been exposed, and now it was time to focus on what was left of me. The hurt was still there, deep down, but it was no longer consuming me. I had to rebuild, but I had to do it on my own terms. I didn't want to let them win by letting their betrayal define the rest of my life. I started to reconnect with the parts of myself that I'd lost. I began taking care of myself again, in ways I had neglected for months. I hit the gym more regularly. I cooked for myself, took walks when I could, and let myself feel the small moments of peace that came with just being alive. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was a way to remind myself that I was still here, that I was still capable of moving forward. Greg, my only real friend left, was there for me in a way I hadn't expected. He didn't pressure me to talk, didn't try to push me into getting over it. He just let me be. He'd check in from time to time, and we'd go grab a drink or catch a game. The conversations were light, but they felt like a lifeline. I wasn't alone. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had someone in my corner again. Eventually, I began to entertain the idea of dating again. It wasn't something I was rushing into, but I knew it was a step I had to take. I was hesitant at first, terrified, really, that I would end up in another relationship built on lies. But little by little, I started to put myself out there again. I met a few women through mutual friends, went on a couple of dates. Nothing serious, nothing to compare to what I had with Mia. But I realized I wasn't broken. I wasn't incapable of love. I had just been betrayed by the wrong people, and it had nothing to do with who I was as a person. The truth was, I didn't want revenge anymore. I didn't want to carry that weight. I had carried it for so long, letting it dictate how I viewed everything around me. But it wasn't mine to carry anymore. Mia and Zane had made their choices, and I had made mine. I didn't have to stay angry. I didn't have to stay bitter. I could move on. That was the hardest thing to accept. That moving on didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean pretending nothing happened. It meant accepting that it was part of my story now, but it didn't have to define my future. I didn't need to constantly look over my shoulder, to worry about their opinions or their attempts to guilt me into forgiving them. What they did to me didn't need to control me anymore. One day, I came across a picture of Mia on my phone. It was from when we first met, before any of this happened. She was smiling in it, and for a second, I felt a flicker of the love I once had for her. But it was fleeting. It was a memory, not a reality. The person in that picture didn't exist anymore. And neither did the life we had. The closure didn't come in the way I thought it would. It didn't come with an apology or an explanation from Mia. It didn't come with Zane begging for forgiveness. It came in the form of me letting go, of realizing that the past, no matter how painful, couldn't be changed. I was going to be okay. I was already on my way to being okay. Moving on wasn't about forgetting what happened. It wasn't about erasing the pain or pretending I hadn't been hurt. It was about accepting that life goes on, even after the worst things happen. And maybe that was the hardest thing of all to learn. But it was also the most important. I had survived. And now, I was ready to live again.